Trek 3 miles up the side of a mountain because it's an area that is supposed to be really beautiful and doesn't get photographed maybe as much as some other places around. And so it's an opportunity to come out and experience a new place. It's an opportunity to spend some time with friends. It's an opportunity to get in on some new adventures, with the ultimate goal of of creating some images that give people maybe more respect for this area, and hopefully encourage them to kind of get out and explore some of these areas that we have in our backyard that maybe they haven't been to before. Yeah, I think with backpacking, it gives you an opportunity to be in a place for when things get really special. So if you were to come up here for a day hike, it'd be pretty, and I think you know, everyone would love it. But spending a couple days in a place lets you really explore it. It allows you to really immerse yourself in that place. And then ultimately, kind of like I said, it allows you to be able to be there for moments that you wouldn't be there for a day hike. So if storms are lifting or coming in and it's really interesting, stuff that you don't get just by day hiking, or being able to catch sunrise and sunset in the same place and really kind of see the fish rising and all of that. You just don't get that when you're up here for a couple hours and then go back to your car and then back to the hotel or to home or wherever that may be. So this allows you to really experience a place the way I think we should. I got into landscape photography kind of at an early age. My dad is a photographer, not professionally, but he's a really good photographer. And so tagging around with him, and my mom, we'd go all over the U.S. It's in all the national parks and in all the states, and exploring those areas. And so I got into it kind of an early age, took a break through college and grad school, and then moved out to Colorado. And with as beautiful as Colorado is, kind of inspired me to get back into it. And then the last few years, getting a little more serious with it. That's a good question. I've found that the more I immerse myself in a place, the happier I am if I don't catch that special moment. But my goal with every trip is to come away with some images that have some really beautiful light, ideally some really beautiful clouds, and some place that's special and that most people probably haven't seen before, or certainly in a way that people haven't seen before. So if I can come away with something unique that has beautiful light, has the clouds, has that, then I'm happy. To me, that's kind of the ultimate. It's hard to do, and most trips don't end with that. But when it all comes together, it's one of those things that it's hard to put in words. You kind of just have to be there and experience it, because it's just so kind of magical and amazing that we have these places. I think as a landscape photographer, I've tried to be more flexible the more I get into it. So the image that I have in mind, not being as mad if I don't come away with that, but finding something else that's really interesting, which I think is more challenging and also more rewarding. But there's been trips where I've gotten up at 2 a.m, hiked up, and didn't take a shot because the conditions just didn't allow for it. And although it's really disappointing, I also was able to spend a day in the mountains, and that still beats a lot of what else I could be doing. And so I think, as disappointing as not getting what you want is, it's important to kind of think to yourself that it's still not a bad day. It's maybe disappointing, but at the end, you learn something from it. You learn how to forecast better, or read the forecast better. you think of, oh, but maybe if I would have approached it from this way, that angle, maybe I could have got something. So, so you try to learn from it. But I think it's just that reminder of you're still in the mountains, and you're still in a place that is really beautiful. And if you remember those things, then it's not so difficult. Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that um, that because it didn't work out that time doesn't mean it won't the next. And there's always that push. There's always that desire that and hope that it's going to work out the next time. As far as keeping that hope, sometimes it's tough. I mean, there's trips where I've been out for a few days and not really gotten anything. Um, but nature has a way of surprising you, and I think when you start thinking that it's not going to happen and kind of um, you lose that hope, that desire is exactly when it's going to happen. And so at any time something really interesting can happen out here, and so I think it's important to just realize that yeah, when you kind of give up is exactly when it's going to be what you wanted it to be. And so at the very least, you can say, I tried, I did what I could do. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think that's much easier to swallow for a photographer like myself than it is if I didn't try and something really interesting happened. I think I beat myself up a lot more for that. Yeah, my goal with an image is to make it kind of as realistic as possible. So basically, if you were standing next to me, whether for sunrise this morning, what I come up with, what the finished product is you could be like, yeah, that's what I saw too. And so, in order to get that, it kind of depends. Some of the underwater images take a while because there's more things I have to put together. But typical time editing, maybe an hour, 1 to 2 hours maybe for more complicated ones. Um, if it's a little easier shot and there's not a whole lot I really need to do, maybe 30, 45 minutes. I think a lot of photographers, especially ones that are kind of starting out, kind of get obsessed with color. And so they see a certain color flower, they see clouds of a certain color, and they get really excited about it. And absolutely they should. It's beautiful. But the most important thing is the light. If the light is bad, but there's some color, the photo is not going to be what it could be. Which is why a lot of landscape photographers generally shoot in golden hour, which is kind of that hour around sunrise and hour around sunset, because that's when the light is at its least harsh and when it's at its best. And you can get that really pretty lights on the mountains, on the lakes, kind of whatever you're trying to shoot, but that's where that really pretty light comes in. I think too often photographers will also kind of forget about when there's some clouds and weather moving in. You can get some really interesting light because of what the sun is doing through the cloud, or how the clouds are filtering the sun. And so you can get some really interesting light at that point. But I think, like I said, it's easy to get kind of hung up on the color and obsessed with the color. And like you said, the light is really what you want to be paying attention to. If the light is not good, I try not to force it. So there's mornings where I see a bit of color, but the light just doesn't look very good, and I really don't shoot much because I know when I come back, there's not much you can do editing to make up for bad light. You can do a little bit with color, but with bad light, there's not a lot you can do with it. So I try to really focus and shoot mostly when the light is more interesting. It doesn't always work, but that's when I'm looking at a scene. That's the first thing, or one of the first things I look at is that quality of light. It's just that important, and I think for photographers starting out, I think that's something that kind of keep in the back of your head because it's easy to forget about. But it really is that important. Yeah, when I get to a new location, especially one that there's not a lot of information, maybe photographically about, it's a lot of just kind of staring. So getting to a spot and really trying to take it all in, looking at different angles on the peaks and how the lakes kind of go together, and how if there's flowers around, or if it's fall and the aspen, really kind of how the scene goes together. It's spending a lot of time looking at that before I necessarily even get the camera out, because I think it's important to have to be kind of actively trying to find compositions. So part of it is going back to the light, of knowing where the light may be best, where it's coming from, where it's going, where it's going to hit mountains, or that kind of a thing, to give you the best idea of where the light's going to be. And then from there, kind of developing what would be an interesting composition. So sometimes, like, where we were at this morning, where down at the lakeshore might be good at times, or 50 feet up from the lake may be good to kind of give you the whole picture. So trying to kind of figure out those things. And so in my head, I'm sort of playing videos or looking, photographs of what might be interesting. And so trying to take it all in so I can kind of develop those images in my head, that I can then go back to when the light is good, and try to capture that the best way possible. I would say I'm pretty careful about not getting too ahead of myself on the perfect image. I've had a number of times where what looked really nice on the back of the camera, and in real life, I got it and put it on the monitor at home, and it wasn't what I thought it was. So I'm always cautiously optimistic about it. When I'm cautiously optimistic about it, I will say it's a lot easier to hike down. It goes by faster. I talk to people more. The stoke factor is definitely higher. When I feel like there's the potential for something really good in there, than when I know I just didn't get anything that morning. And it's one of those things too, I think that sometimes it's hard to explain when a golfer hits a perfect shot, or what they think of as a perfect shot, when a fisherman makes the perfect cast and catches a beautiful, beautiful trout. All those things are kind of hard to explain, but you just feel better about it. And then everything that comes after that is much easier to roll with, it's easier to take, because you feel like you put in the work and it paid off. And there's something kind of special about that. Yeah, I think with landscape photography, with like kind of any new, whether it be hobby or profession, or how serious you want to get into it, I think of it more of a marathon than a sprint. That because you didn't get that perfect image that time doesn't mean you're not a good photographer, because you didn't come away with what you thought you could come away with, and it means you're not good enough. It means that it's a learning experience, and you learn from it, and the next time it comes out better. I think one of the big things that I've noticed, especially with social media and that, is that people tend to maybe think they're doing better than they are when they're, how do I say it, that they create snapshots that are a nice image or a slight moment in time, but there's not anything more to it. It doesn't evoke emotion. The composition isn't particularly strong. It goes back, the focus on color versus light. All those things, I think, are what people that are far better than I am at this, what their images have, and what I strive to do better with is working really hard on trying to find an interesting composition, not just taking the easy one, but really working. And sometimes it means you're not going to get as maybe pretty a photograph, but it means that you will be much more competent at it in the future. and the chances of you getting something that really matters, that means something, that that people look at, and it's not just a nice photo, but it resonates on a much deeper level. I mean, I think for landscape photographers, that's kind of that's one of the ultimate goals. And I think a lot of people fall short because they don't think as much about the light, they don't think as much about the composition, and they don't put in as much work to find something unique and different. So when people come and ask me, those are the few things I can think of that really put in your time early. And it means you're going to fail a lot, and it means you're going to come away with stuff that you don't like a lot, but it means you're growing as an artist. And if you're growing as an artist, that's going to pay off, and eventually you're going to be really happy with what you come up with. Yeah, there's, I think being especially a landscape photographer, we rely a lot more on forecasts and that than maybe some other styles of photography, simply because when we come out to the mountains, we don't get to create the light, we don't get to create the weather. We rely on what's around us to try to make something interesting. So a few things that I use pretty regularly, there's an app called Skyfire that does a reasonably good job of kind of telling you the odds of there being a colorful sunrise or sunset in your area. National Weather Service has kind of pinpoint forecasts, and you can do an hourly. So within a couple of days, it's usually fairly accurate. Other parts of the country, like Weather Underground, has some really good forecasts. There's Mountain Forecast is another one where it's mostly 14ers, but some 13ers in some other mountains in Colorado that'll give you a pinpoint forecast for that specific mountain. So, so for like this trip, we're in Holy Cross Wilderness. Even though we're not right next to Mount of the Holy Cross, Mountain Forecast has Mount of the Holy Cross on it, and that gives you an idea of what to expect when you're in that area. So it may not be exactly, but it gives you some idea of kind of what to expect. And so if it's, you know, if things just look like it's just going to be nothing but rain and storms for 2 days, that may not be the best time to go out. There's probably some other part of the state that's going to be a little better, or at least variable to the point where something interesting might happen. So kind of looking at those tools is how I do a lot of trying to kind of decide where I'm going to go when. And then there's a lot of luck involved. So hoping for good luck. Well, you had mentioned earlier, like kind of what's that perfect moment, right? What's that perfect photograph? And I think those of us in landscape photography haven't gotten it yet. So I think it's that push to keep going out and waiting for that moment that just totally sings to you, sings to your soul. I think that drives a lot of us to kind of keep going and doing what we're doing. I think too, there's, for me, there's a drive to show and to shoot things that are kind of more unique, so maybe you haven't seen before. And so one of the things that really drives me is my interest in the unknown. So I wonder, what does this place look like, and how can it be photographed? And if it's a place that's maybe been photographed a bit more, or it's a little more well known, is there a way you can do something in a totally new way? So I had mentioned that underwater project. So there's some lakes in Rocky Mountain National Park that I've, some other places, but that's been the focus so far, of shooting it using that underwater housing. And I think some of the images coming out of that are of places people have seen, but not that way. And I think at least some of them have done a good job of resonating with some people that have been to that place, but maybe haven't experienced it that way. And I think that kind of drive to continue to show things that are different, and for myself, but also to others, is a powerful one. And I think that keeps me going a lot of mornings where maybe I'd rather be in the sleeping bag. So. Yeah, there's a photographer in Canada named Paul Ziska, who I saw doing some mountain shooting, and he's an amazing photographer. but he had started using underwater housing to do some things near roads, but in the mountains in a way I had not seen before. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought it'd be really interesting to take kind of that idea and then start looking at shooting places in the mountains in Colorado, and ultimately expand out, but showing lakes and streams and waterfalls and different things that we kind of take for granted at a certain level. So we look at it from eye level and it's really beautiful, but what does it look like beneath the waves? How does that change that setting? How does it make it more interesting, or does it? And so this summer it started that project, hoping to kind of show places in Colorado in a different way. So some of the places are known, but not necessarily that way, and other places, most people have never seen before. And so it's really interesting taking that up there and showing off these places in a new way. And it's a lot of extra weight, so it's not necessarily the easiest task. But I've also found that not only showing these places off in a new way, but kind of immersing myself in it by actually being in it gives me a greater appreciation for that place. And so even if I don't come away with a really great shot, I find myself less disappointed than I would be maybe if I just kind of walked up to the shoreline and not gotten a great sunrise shot and then had to head back. But by being in the lake, there's just a greater appreciation and maybe a more powerful experience that way. So it's been really great experiencing that, in addition to, like I said, kind of showing Colorado all the beautiful mountain lakes and waterways we have in a new way. So.